Hello, that should be it. So I apologize for all of the technical difficulties. Right now, for some reason, OBS's versioning changed or something, and YouTube did not want to originally receive this stream. But after some confusion, I think we're on track, so I'm just starting the stream and figuring it out later. We'll wait at least 50 minutes for people to come in, and people will tell me, hopefully in the live chat, whether this is working or not. Oh, I'm not sick. I got back from a trip, and it's been, I just came back from playing some sports. So if people are curious why my voice is sounds a little bit different, that's why. At any rate, I wanted to take this opportunity to, well, as I usually do on Sundays, to answer questions from the audience, but also this time to review one of my, well, I don't know. I remember this YouTuber from a really long time ago, Innuendo Studios, which was, I think, they were one of the original sort of defenders of what we might call the social justice warrior left. A really weird personality. And this YouTuber who's quite popular, actually, he's been doing this for a few years. He's been making videos about discourse with the alt-right. And this is a person who I'm sure has had almost no actual interaction with the alt-right. But he's persisting on this, and it's really resulted in this bizarre set of videos that I've been kind of trying to decode in my mind. I play tennis. I'm gonna actually, you're right, I have a little bit of a rough throat. I'm gonna need to go, well, I don't know. I'll have to get a drink, but I'll be right back. Pardon me, guys. So I should be back now. Thanks a lot. So after at 4:30, when the event's actually supposed to be starting, we can take a look at Innuendo Studios and review what I think is sort of an interesting psychological feature of the left, which is what I call fake narratives about discourse. Yeah. No, I don't golf. I probably should. That'd be more aristocratic, right? I don't know. I mean, golf is kind of, it's not as scenic as hiking, but it doesn't ever get your blood pumping. So, what's the point? But anyway, if people have, is my, okay, well, I don't know what to say. Is this actually an audio problem, or is my microphone wrong? Um, okay, this is just so, okay, well, I don't know what to say, guys. I can see if the microphone's actually having problems, but my voice is not any lower than it usually is. Okay, if this is an audio problem, then can people help me out here? Okay, it fixed itself. Okay, perfect. I know that my microphone has a loose connection in it, so okay, great. So hopefully I won't jostle the microphone anymore. I think it was damaged because I took it on vacation. But at any rate, we'll be going and looking at Innuendo Studios and seeing what I think is sort of an interesting psychological feature of the left, which is a story about how they interact with the right in dialogue when it's very, very obvious that no dialogue is going on. So in that case, well, I mean, I'm not going to start the video until 4:30. So in the meantime, people can ask questions. Oh, I see that Fritz Imperial has a new video up. That's a thing now, I guess. But I'm not going to be reviewing Fritz's video because I haven't watched it yet. Nobody can have an OBS problem in the future unless, if they do, they're instantaneously a boomer. That's the new rule. Leave aside that OBS updates its software and naturally creates problems, but I guess I was like James Earl Jones then, right? Had kind of the Darth Vader thing going. But at any rate, I can take a look at, maybe I could turn on, I can turn on the video at least. That is Subscribestar. And apparently, Subscribestar is back up again. Looks like, yeah, no one's asking any questions. Unfortunately, due to the confusion of the live stream events, I think it's going to be a pretty disorganized one right now. But at any rate, I did a few videos this week, largely concerning the Covington Catholic kids, which I think this is a milestone for right-wing thinking generally. I think that, and we've gotten an apology from the diocese. I think we have a letter from the bishop that apologizes. I think that's a huge milestone. I also think it's a milestone that people are actually bringing lawsuits against media companies. And hopefully what we'll have some ability to actually hold journalists like Jared Holt to account. This is the ability of journalists to essentially prey upon innocent private citizens is something that needs to be confronted. It needs to be confronted with activism. And so I think that if nothing else, I hope that the Covington Catholic thing can teach the right that. And I guess I'm in the position where there's a class of people who's, in my mind, driving this, and they're not the progressives, because progressives are going to progressive. SJWs are intent on destroying any kind of vestige of traditional identity politics or identity conceptions on the West. They think that this is going to be their way of both demonstrating their virtue and being on the right side of history. And because of this, they're unmovable. But what is driving this dynamic in our society is the fact that there's a number of moderates, especially moderates who are of the Generation X and Boomer generation, that look out and see these institutions like the New York Times and the San Francisco Chronicle and essentially all of the mainstream media and go, those guys are the people who are in the middle, that speak for me, that are neutral and do good journalism. And this has to stop. Now, I gave the Britisher a hard time by playing this whole sort of pendulum swing back, like, oh boy, if the progressives keep this up, they're going to lose me, the moderate, which of course, at this stage, what are you waiting for? There's really nothing to keep you inside moderation. What is the mainstream doing to assure you that it's doing its job or is going to push back on anything from the far left? But that being said, I guess these things are just going to have to unfold in the time that they're going to take. So, yeah, in that case, we're going to have some kind of correction, hopefully, or at least there'll be a consolidation. People will be able to see where they stand, because the worst part about our current political dispensation is the fact that we don't really know where we stand. The progressives think they're going to win everything. They think they're going to completely destroy the conservative movement, completely destroy any kind of counter-progressive movement worldwide, and that their ideas are just going to dominate the entire earth forever and ever and ever. Amen. This obviously isn't going to happen. They're slowly beginning to realize that this is not going to happen. And as they realize this, they're going to start shedding their liberalism, especially when they realize that most of their successes come from institutional power that they've managed to seize in the preceding 5 decades. What the conservative movement needs to do is realize that it's in that position and react accordingly. which it currently isn't doing, largely because we're headed by neoconservatives and the sort of Buckleyites that has spent the last 25 years learning the exact wrong lessons from the culture war. And then we also have a series of boomers. And I think if there's one revelation that I got from the Covington thing, it was exactly how the dynamic worked between moderate liberal conservatives and moderate liberal progressives. And that is that moderate liberal progressives are in an activist mode. They feel like they want to change the world in a positive way and bring positive change into the world. Whereas moderate progressive conservatives are like, don't rock the boat, stay the course. They're in a status quo endorsing mode. And this makes it, this is a horrible dynamic because it's an incentive for the conservatives essentially to exaggerate their power, to go to their audience and tell their audience that we have power, that we're some kind of majority fixture in society, when the moderate white middle class is no longer that central fixture. It's the economic incentives have completely moved away from that. Whereas the progressives have the incentive to essentially go to their audience and go like, oh, we're less powerful. We've got no powerful. We have no power. The left is completely disempowered in America, even though most corporation leaders are leftists, all of the universities are leftists, all of the media is essentially left leaning. I mean, how they dominate every institution that actually has a good financial backing. Perhaps fossil fuels notwithstanding, right? Maybe. But even then, like the president of Shell I think he votes Democrat, right? So this is a dynamic that is going to continue largely because of the fact that we have two audiences, and the audience of conservatives is in the business of buying papers and dedicating to causes that assure them that everything is more or less all right. And that's not what's going on right now. Things are more or less not all right, but the problems lie on the left. And this is something that our entire cultural apparatus for the last 35 years has been very ill-adjusted to actually understand a problem like this. And so that's sort of where we find ourselves currently. I'm not seeing any questions, guys. If you have a question for me, I'm not starting the video until 4:30, so you just have to @reply me or super chat me, in which case I will try to answer. I see a lot of people highlighting boomers all the time. I'm a boomer and I hate the New York Times. Well, I do realize that, like, the Ben Shapiro types and the National Review types, they do hate the National Review, but they don't understand the extent to which the power asymmetry and the political asymmetry in this country has gone. They don't understand that probably after 2020, the possibility for a conservative to win a large national election will be extremely reduced to the fact that the Democrats will be able to swing for the walls to their left, and they'll largely be able to get away with it. One thing you didn't touch on your Covington video is how not a single progressive admitted they were wrong about it. Not exactly true. There were some progressives from the Atlantic that admitted they were wrong, but to a large extent, the progressive media doubled down and they memory hold the thing, which is what is going to be the next thing. Would you consider doing a review on anime? Actually, anime, I'm going to do a 2-part. The next installment of the Trad Codex series is going to be on anime. I think I'm going to do one on Miyazaki and one on other anime, and it's going to be largely concerning basically it's going to be how I don't think anime, well, it's going to be criticism, right? I think that oftentimes, I mean, obviously there's anime that's terrible and everyone criticizes it, and that's a thing, but I think that oftentimes the problems in anime derive from the difficulties you find in anime like Miyazaki, which everyone can't praise enough. The Franklin, when are you going to chat? Waifu is going on vacation in 2 weeks. I was going to interview you, so we should definitely set up a chat, even if we don't do a formal interview. Do you watch anime? I used to watch anime. Now I really don't, unless you mean Miyazaki. My favorite Miyazaki movie is Spirited Away, although that's not a very creative choice. I did like Howl's Moving Castle, even though a lot of people didn't like that one. Yeah, Miyazaki has a lot of problems in him, though, and I think that this is something that isn't discussed. And I think a lot of the I think everyone realizes that anime is filling some kind of niche in our cultural diet, that it replaced something that we no longer have. And I think what it replaced is sort of pulp fiction, or middlebrow narrative fiction targeted at adults. And we also sort of have this instinct that whatever it replaced it, like the way anime is replacing what used to be sort of narrative adult oriented fiction that was neither highbrow or lowbrow. But I think people get the sense that the way anime is replacing that is really not very good, or there's something deeply wrong with it. For a super chat, Stephen Brocky for Hong Kong $50. Thank you very much for your contribution. Thanks for your latest video on Ayn Rand. Any thoughts on the transition in game series and how it looks at contemporary culture in BioShock Infinite? Well, I'm going to do a separate video on BioShock Infinite. I'm going to do so originally Trad Codex was going to be like, I take culture, some of it's going to be old culture and some of it's going to be new culture. And I was planning on doing things like 1 week I do Lovecraft, and then I would do Hieronymus Bosch. Yeah, I know I said Bosch in the thing a few times in the actual video on Lovecraft, but it's Bosch. Or I would do Peter Bruegel. But I discovered that it was really very hard to do an interesting video on the older stuff because, I'm not like a brilliant comparative literature critic. I'm not going to come up with some kind of observation about Bruegel that hasn't been said by people who are way more qualified than I am. So it's obviously easier to do analysis of contemporary fiction because it's not as well documented or as highly commented on. But what I've been trying to do is I've been trying to, every time I take a newer contemporary piece of fiction, to bring in things. So I do an analysis of Lovecraft and I bring in Bruegel and Bosch. I do an analysis of Ayn Rand, of BioShock, and I bring in Ayn Rand, although Ayn Rand is more or less contemporary. And I think by doing that, by sort of combining two in one, I can get more culture into these videos and still make them interesting to a contemporary audience. BioShock Infinite, I intend to discuss when I'm discussing early 20th century fiction and late 19th century fiction. And I think I'm much more critical of BioShock Infinite. I think there are some problems with BioShock, but I think insofar as video games can tell a story, it probably does as well as any medium can do. BioShock Infinite, I think it was really good. I think it was brilliant. It took a lot of risks, but I ultimately think that BioShock Infinite is bad art. And I think it ultimately failed in a lot of ways. And I think its failures are much more interesting than its successes. And I think it starts with sort of what everyone comments on with the divergence between gameplay and story. But it also continues on the central problem of BioShock Infinite, which is the character of Elizabeth, which is BioShock Infinite invites the video game player to hate the society, but at the same time love a femininity, a sort of female heroine that is completely the product of the society that we're trying to hate. And how much can you hate early 20th century society and simply be in admiration of the people it produced? And that's sort of what I always think about when I think of J.R.R. Tolkien and Anna Green Gables and James Herriot, the person who wrote All Creatures Great and Small, a series of sort of early and mid 20th century fiction. And I think that we've come to hate this this period in history, basically because post World War II we had to. That was sort of the founding myth of the modern era. But at the same time, when we read this older literature, we can't help but see these characters and go like, wow, this is so much more admirable than things we typically see in the modern age. So I'm going to go on and, you guys on the aesthetic strain. Okay, let's take a look at this. Oh, the alt-right playbook. Oh man, there's just so much to say about Innuendo Studios. I mean, I guess you could do these really in any order you wanted to, but for those of you guys who aren't aware about Innuendo Studios, again, this is one of the classic pro SJW channels back in the day. I think, is this not the same guy that went on CNN and talked about being polyamorous and how like he felt empowered by the fact that his fiance or wife or something was dating other men? I think this was the guy, but at any rate, he's been doing a lot of these videos, and the thing is he's been doing essentially the last year and a half. He's been doing a series of videos. Like I said, I said it once, I'll say it again. He's been doing a series of videos about the alt-right, and it's painfully obvious that he has had very little to no interaction with any intelligent alt-righters. And it's not like he's looking for an interaction too. But what we're looking at here is sort of the myth of a discourse. And that's what Innuendo Studios is trying to communicate. He's trying to tell a story to progressives about how they tried to talk to you guys, but it's just not worth it anymore. So he has 1,000 reasons for not talking to the opposition. And they contradict each other, but it also just seems unlikely. I mean, how likely is it that everybody in an entire demographic is just beyond the pale? But this is the narrative that Innuendo Studios is here to really talk about. Samurai Squirrel for $5. Could you do a video on the Garden of Earthly Delights and dangers of hedonism? Maybe a modern day version of Don Giovanni somewhere. Like, that's the video I thought I kind of did a little bit. I mean, I went through each panel of the Garden of Earthly Delights in the video on Lovecraft. I think it's a good idea. I mean, I guess I could probably do a 10-minute video on it, and maybe I should get better at doing 10-minute videos. Oh, sorry, it's a super chat from $5 from Samurai Squirrel for $5. Thank you for your contribution. He's who I'm reading. But I think that when the Garden of Earthly Delights, and I'll probably do one on Don Giovanni, although I use Don Giovanni in a conversation about ContraPoints. It's hard because we don't know exactly what Bosch wanted to express with Garden of Earthly Delights. And so what we have is the 3 panels, and you know, I already kind of like did a video where I took a close look at those 3 panels. And that was okay, sorry about that. My microphone just went out. This thing is quite sensitive. I assume that people are still hearing me. Okay. Okay, so I'm assuming that this is still going, but my microphone just cut out there because it's not working properly. But I'm not so sure what I can say other than what I said in the Lovecraft video. So, okay. Yeah, this is going to be hard if this microphone doesn't start getting better. I'll have to be very delicate with it. Every time. So I think that this is a time to go and do the video. So I'm going to let it play. If there's any problems in hearing this, just let me know. There shouldn't be. I mean, I know this is something like every time for these progressive videos is that they have to include trigger warnings because of the fact that this is something that they've complained about themselves, and if they don't, their audience is going to give them shit about it. But at the same time, they can't. They know that it's really lame to disclaim every word that comes out of your mouth. So, they always have to find like funny ways to do trigger warnings or kind of pretend like they're doing it ironically. They're obviously not doing it ironically.
Say, for the sake of argument, you're online blogging.
Okay, every one of these things says, say for the sake of argument. Again, implying that he's actually done this. I don't think this is actually, any of these interactions have actually happened to him. Unless he's just trolling the comment section for alt-right bloggers.
About a black journalist's commentary on marketing trends in video games, movies, and comic books. And you're saying how the vitriol in response to her fairly benign opinions reveals the deep-seated racism and misogyny in a number of fan communities.
So, I mean, this is like implying, I think, from this picture that this black journalist is just on a personal blog. Usually most of the complaints involving progressive opinions come from the fact that these radical figures aren't just publishing their own blogs or on radical leftist newspapers, but are put forward in the mainstream in things in mediums that present themselves as ideologically neutral or moderate. So you can already tell sort of that he's preloading the argument here. So that he can spike something down. And, you know, this is obviously, maybe this is literally a conversation he had in the comments, because I don't remember this being a large scale controversy about, I mean, I guess this is again about conversing with people in the comments, but I'm going to let this go a little bit further.
Most especially those that lean right. When a right-leaning commenter pops in to say, or maybe they just actually disagree with her about marketing trends. For Christ's sake, there's no mystery here. People aren't speaking in coded language. They are telling you what they believe.
Okay, notice also, and I love it in Innuendo Studios, is that every single one, you can tell that like one of his little like Muppet characters is a right-winger because they got the little angry eyebrows. And one of the most, I don't want to say famous, but one of the most like the sort of, what I always associate, with Innuendo Studios is a series of videos called Why Are You So Angry?, in which he tries to explore why right-wingers are so angry. And it's basically just like non-stop passive-aggressive like insults towards right-wingers, followed up by but why are you so angry, guys? It literally feels like the psychological version of a bully saying like, why are you hitting yourself? Why are you hitting yourself? I mean, if you are passive aggressive and insulting towards people, they're going to get angry. That's not a mystery. And bloggers we're incentivized to be kind of snarky and aloof. That's how you cultivate sort of the winning personality for blogging. And even though I don't think I'm really cut to that mold precisely, I've had my snobby moments, and when you get 1,000 comments in one day, and you have to come up with one sentence answers that sound like they're complete, and you're not being cowardly, so you're encouraged to be snarky and dismissive, and that gets people angry at you. But it's not a mystery. If someone gives me a comment, and it's like a shitlib comment I've heard 1,000 times, if I knew them in real life, I'd probably talk to them and reason them with them like a person. But this is one of 800 comments. I can't do that. And so, for the shitlib, I just kind of leave a snarky comment or something like that, because, you have a schedule to keep, right? And I know that person's going to get angry at me, but I find it strange that you would be snarky or passive aggressive to somebody like Innuendo Studios is doing, and then go like, but why are you angry, guys? Like, why are you so angry? The narrative, I think, is that this is always the narrative with Innuendo Studios. The innuendo is that there's something psychologically wrong with right-wingers, that they're filled with hate, guys. Well, okay, I see people say that Sargon drew angry eyebrows on Black Pigeon Speaks, and it's not just that, this is angry eyebrows on one character that Innuendo Studios has a problem with. The difficulty is that every single right-wing character has the angry eyebrows on them, and so that's what I was commenting on. But of course, now we're going to debunk people saying that you should take opposing arguments at face value.
She had a bad opinion. Why do you have to make it bigger than that? Why can't you ever take people at their word? You pause and ponder this for a moment.
The question itself is so astoundingly bizarre. Like, how could we ever answer this question? Who could think to answer this, taking people at their word? That's nuts.
Heck with it. You're in a discoursing mood. Let's do this. Mr. Conservative. In order for me...
Oh boy, yeah. I wonder, do I ever respond like, "Hey, Mr. SJW, let me explain some truth to you. You don't have any good views. I shouldn't have to take your views at face value. So sit over here in my angry chair, Mr. Liberal, and let me explain things to you." Good Lord, this cracks me up every time. I actually kind of get some, like, because this is literally, this is what everybody thinks in their head. This is the kind of discourse that everyone thinks about when they think about their opponents inside their heads, and when they're kind of fantasizing about how they would sit down with their opponents and set them straight. But usually people have enough awareness that when they're making videos, they kind of add some caveats in, so it doesn't come off as this... as if we're kind of like, as if it was like a G.I. Joe, like, you know, PSA level announcement about how, like, you shouldn't smoke or do alcohol at school or drink alcohol at school or something. It looks like I have a super chat from the Driver for £10. Thank you very much for your contribution. If the West in the next 2 decades descends into instability and civil war, will you accept the fact that we must genocide the political left for us to be ideologically victorious? We would write history. Why? How do you genocide a political elite? Like, that doesn't even make any sense. Do you mean purge? Because a genocide I don't think that our political elite is a class, a race of people, or an ethnicity. That's what a genocide would have to be. The French Revolution, the Reign of Terror was horrible, but with a few regions in southern France notwithstanding, it wasn't a genocide. But I don't know, man. I mean, like, I hear all this Civil War stuff. There's really no point in talking about a civil war in a public forum. If there is a civil war and if you win it, the side that loses is going to be horribly oppressed. I don't know what that will involve. The commanders in the civil war will decide what that will involve. And it could be anything from more or less moderate, as it was the case in the first Civil War, where the leaders of the losing side didn't suffer huge penalties for the most part, to something like the Nuremberg trials or the Reign of Terror, or maybe even something more horrific like what happened after the revolution or revolt in Haiti. But it's neither ethically appropriate nor strategically appropriate for us on this side of the conflict to discuss the fate of our enemies or the fate of our opposition. It's wishful thinking. You never go into a conflict so certain you're going to win, and it hurts to fantasize about these things. I pray that everybody involved in this culture war will come to see the truth and the rightness of counter-progressive ideas, but it's not, if it comes to violence, I hope that the violence is minimal. And that is all you can really say. Now, maybe civil war is coming, but it's really pointless to talk about what will happen after the civil war before a civil war, because the people making the decisions will have learned so much more than we know right now. It's sort of like somebody, it's like Leonardo da Vinci. drawing the first sketch of a helicopter that wouldn't work in its earliest conceptions. And then, going into extended debate about how air traffic control would work once we invented the helicopter. There's no way of really understanding what the decisions will be at this stage. The only thing you can do right now is to make sure that you minimize the damage of some conflict, or to organize and make your own side more powerful on a conflict. Discussing the outcomes when you win is fantasizing, and moreover, it's fantasizing in a way that materially hurts your chances of winning. This is my complaint with John Mark too. He's a new right YouTuber. He talks constantly about civil war and about how we need to develop an ideology now so that after a civil war, we'll have everything figured out. Like, dude, if it's before the Civil War, what you need to figure out is how to win the Civil War. Then after the Civil War is won, you can bring your ideas out and debate them with the people who have power then. But the ideas will need to be adapted to the specific circumstances of that specific time period. Not like hypothetically, because there's no perfect system that works independently of the cultural and economic circumstances. If the cultural and economic circumstances of this country massively change, as they would be in a hot civil war, then we might need totally different ideas about the economy and about political organization than we've been operating with over the last 50, maybe even 200 years. So, yeah, that's why I think the question's not completely material. But I'm going to continue on with our friend Innuendo Studios, and let's see how he talks some justice into that right-winger with the angry eyebrows. What does he get? Is that a 4chan symbol? I think it is.
To take you at your word, your words would have to show some consistency.
Oh, burn. You mean right-wingers' words don't have any consistency? Oh, there's no way he thinks that about you, right?
Let me just lightning round a few questions about the reactionary web's positions on marketing trends.
Okay, this is going to be good.
Do you believe that having the option to romance same-sex characters in an RPG turns the game into queer propaganda?
No, but it makes it shitty.
Or do you believe that killing strippers in an action game can't be sexist because no one's making you do it?
Well, that's a conversation about violence in video games which reactionaries tend to oppose. Not that progressives opposed any of this before they learned that certain female characters were killable just like everyone else in the entire universe.
Do you believe that the pervasiveness of sexualized young women in pop culture is just there because it sells, and that's capitalism, and we all need to deal with it?
Nope, I don't believe that. I think it was put there by pernicious ideological influences, although capitalism did play a role as well.
Or do you believe that a franchise has an obligation to cater to its core audience even if diversifying beyond that audience is more profitable?
It doesn't have an obligation, but it doesn't look like it's more profitable. Man, this is easy. I've come out negative on most of these questions.
Do you think words are inherently harmless and only oversensitive snowflakes would care about racialized language?
No, but when it's impossible to carry on a discourse with people who are in academia, that's a problem.
Or do you think it's racist if someone calls you mayonnaise boy?
Well, I don't know, man. I think is the converse the belief that white people, that you can't be racist against people of European descent? Not to mention, isn't the popularity of mayonnaise maximum in South America? I've seen charts about this. The idea that mayonnaise is like some kind of white American thing. I think the cultures that eat the most mayonnaise are France, Spain, and then I think Chile was the third one or something like that. It's not a Northern European thing, guys. It's Southern European and South American, as far as I can tell. But anyway, I mean, so this is the thing, right? But the problem with this is that he's creating stated versions of these things. And you could just as easily ask if the left wing is contradicting their views by believing the exact converse, right? So do you believe that you should be able to critique video games for wrong choices you can make, as in the stripper example, or do you believe that you can't and that it's homophobic for people to criticize the choice of having same-sex relationships in video games? Oh, burn, contradiction, right? Just go about and invert it. Or hold on, do you believe that words, everyone should have free speech, or do you believe that we should restrict racist speech, or do you think that people who say that we should cancel white people should get jobs in the New York Times editorial staff? I mean, we just can go on down and down and down and down. Now, I know A and B being mutually exclusive does not therefore imply that not A and not B are mutually exclusive, right? So obviously he's imagining a different opinion from the ones he's putting in the mouths of this hypothetical right-winger, such that his views aren't contradictory. But if we rephrase those same views to be so broad, to be so specific as he's doing right now, or to be as strong as they possibly could, you could generate contradictions very easily with just the converse opinions in the exact same controversies.
And as long as I've got your ear, are you the party that believes in the right to keep and bear arms because you're distrustful of all authority, and what if we need to overthrow the government some?
I've never heard any right-winger say we're distrustful of all authority. That's an anarchist thing.
Or do you believe that cops are civil servants and we should trust their account of events whenever they shoot a black man for looking like he might have a gun?
Neither the argument either. I mean, I don't know. These are the fact that these arguments are coming out are misrepresentations. The bodies trusted to look into these events, both the juries and also the independent investigations done both by the state and federal levels when it came to the Ferguson incident and when it came to the Trayvon Martin incident, both of those investigations turned up no evidence that those shootings were unjust. And the media essentially lied about it. Now, we can rephrase it to say that every time a cop shoots a black person, then we're just totally on board with the cop getting off scot-free. But that has not been the case. There have not been conservative defenses of egregiously unjustified shootings of black teenagers. There have been several instances where cops were egregiously in the wrong. One shooting a black person, I think it was last year. And for the most part, all I heard from the conservative press was, let's wait till the evidence comes in, let's let a jury decide, which should be anyone's response to a acute criminal incident. It's only the progressives that try to make sweeping generalizations about these interactions and don't take them on a case-by-case basis. But I mean, again, I feel like I'm a neoconservative saying this, right? I feel like I should be writing for National Review. And the only reason why I'm repeating this talking point, which of course everyone here has heard millions of times from Ben Shapiro, is that, Ben Shapiro, his arguments are so cliche they make my ears bleed, but we're not even getting a proper rendition of them, which means that either he's dishonestly relating them so we can have this imaginary story about how Innuendo Studios bravely interacted with the self-contradicting right-winger, or he just has never interacted with an intelligent conservative speaker. So Ant-Man for $5. What is your opinion about thank you for your contribution, I should say. But he asks, what is your opinion about giving charity to the homeless in the context of the drug epidemic? If there is a reasonable chance they are a drug addict, if you want to help the homeless, you should give to homeless shelters and food banks, and people who help homeless. I think that giving cash to people who are on the side of the streets tends to be counterproductive. More than that, what right-wingers should do is not only should they give money to homeless people, they should start organizing right-wing social justice to directly address the drug epidemic in our society. This is something that people in the progressive side, they've been turning a blind eye to this for about a decade now. And the drug epidemic, along with homelessness, along with livable inner cities and low-income housing that's properly spaced out, is something that the right wing needs to make their issue. I think that Tucker Carlson has taken the first step on this in a lot of ways. It's a really good first step, but it needs to be followed up institutionally by right-wingers organizing explicitly right-wing institutions that are linked to the reactionary ideas that, well, I hold and a lot of the people hold on this channel, that are willing to go out and get their hands dirty with actual volunteering and with actual control and ownership over trying to solve a social justice issue. And if they do that, it's going to be much, much more difficult to do what Innuendo Studios is doing right now and convince people that they're all just angry internet tards or something like that. I'm going to continue the video, though.
Does optional content reveal a game's ideology, or doesn't it? Is capitalism...
Okay, but, like, the progressives are on both sides of that issue, depending on how you phrase it.
A defense for decisions you don't agree with, or isn't it?
Wait. In the wake of Patreon and the Twitter bannings, how is that not more of a problem for the left? Unless you're, a brain dead neoconservative, or not neoconservative, brain dead like National Review type conservatarian, capitalism isn't a defense for anything. It's a tool, like Tucker Carlson said. So this question's more of a problem for the left sitting on top of Twitter bans, and obviously being the beneficiary of a campaign to purge social media platforms of their right-wing sides. This is more of a question for them.
Is language harmful or not? Do you hate authority or love cops and the troops?
Okay, progressive, do you love authority or do you hate the cops and the troops?
Okay, but
okay, I cannot believe that Innuendo Studios is so dumb they don't see the problem with this, right?
Ease off. Add some nuance. Now, I know the right is not a monolith, and maybe these arguments are contradictory because they're coming from different people. We'll call them Engelbert and Charlemagne.
Yeah, because there's only two people on the right.
Maybe Engelbert's the one who thinks any institution funded by tax money is socialist and therefore bad, and Charlemagne's the one who says we should dump even more tax money into the military and thinking otherwise is un-American.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it works. I mean, I don't know, this... To say that this is a hypothetical is only comes from somebody who has no knowledge of right-wing forums to begin with.
But here's the thing. Y'all have very fundamentally different beliefs, and you're so passionate about them that you're entering search terms into Twitter to find people you don't even follow and aggressively disagree with them, and yet you're always yelling at me and never yelling at each other. What's that about? And I can't say how often it happens.
Yeah, because there's no contradictions on the left.
Happens, but I know if I let Engelbert go on long enough, he sometimes makes a Charlemagne argument, and vice versa. And I see you getting ready to say the left does the same thing, but don't change the subject.
Hold on, conservatives. The existence of leftist hypocrisy when you're pointing out right-wing hypocrisy is a uniquely terrible thing. Doesn't make any difference. How could it not be relevant if you're saying this is a quality? If you're saying that the existence of right-wing hypocrisy, hypocrisy, like just its existence anywhere on the internet, disqualifies the right wing from consideration inside a discourse, how could the converse being true not be relevant? If the right wing were on trial, and then after this video, we would examine possible contradictions on the left, then you might have a point. But that's not material to the claim you're making.
That's an extremely false equivalence, but more importantly, it doesn't answer my question. What do you actually believe? And why?
I think Innuendo Studios actually thinks that the right wing is comprised of a very small number of individual people. Like, I think Innuendo Studios, he might actually think that the right wing is essentially 5 different personalities, and these people actually just Xerox their opinions off onto the masses. Which, I mean, given the complacency of some right-wingers, especially in the more traditional right-winger, the sort of CPAC variety, I can see how some progressives look at the right and see sort of a sheep-like mentality building, but this is movement with 20 million people. What do you actually believe? And don't contradict yourself even once, because that contradiction will prove that your movement's not serious.
Why are you so capable of respecting disagreement between each other, yet so incapable of respecting me? Or, for that matter, a black woman?
Okay. Yeah, because your series of the alt-right playbooks totally projects a certain level of respect that you have for your opponent's opinions. and your problem with the right wing is not that they disagree with you, it's that they disagree with the hypothetical black woman who's sitting next to me. I mean, this is okay. I don't know. Like the problem is, is this the PragerU of SJWism? I mean, I have to say that, like, maybe the reason, because there's no way, because when I see this is the stereotype of the progressive, right? Like, conservative disagrees with him. You're like, why are you so mean to me? After essentially communicating disrespect up until that point. And then the second, like, you realize that, like, he gets a little too self-conscious about essentially claiming victimhood or saying you're being mean to me. So he hauls out, like, a minority from the top of the progressive stack to kind of stand in as his focal point of progressive concern about how they're being mean. I just can't imagine that someone who is reasonably intelligent would see this and not immediately, like, kind of play that back in their mind and go, like, okay, am I fulfilling every stereotype ever written about a progressive? I mean, usually self-awareness kind of kicks in at this stage. I mean, just this picture you're seeing in front of yourself us right now, like, self-awareness would kick in to me if I did an illustration like this. But I get this sort of sense with PragerU where they're and I think Endeavor and also Argent Templar did videos concerning PragerU. I think it was basically this month. And it's been a really long time since I've watched PragerU, but PragerU is perfectly comfortable with putting people into their videos that just make the most ham-fisted, heard it 1,000 times. The answer to it feels like it comes from 1998. Stale conservative content that even as a conservative, even if you agree with it, you start cringing because it relies so much on slogans like, oh, just anyone can be a millionaire. You just have to get out there and work hard and get married. And you're thinking to yourself, like, I'm a conservative, I'm a reactionary, and that sounds cheap. And not only does it sound cheap, it sounds so stale that I cringe because I'm worried that people on the left are going to see this video and associate you with me. Maybe this is the progressive version of PragerU, but I'm going to do some super chats before I start laughing again at this thing. I think this is the last one. No, I have a few more. Okay. Charlemagne for $2 says, straw man, yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I mean, it is a straw man. I mean, I guess I guess what I wanted to do when I was reviewing this video is just trying to get into the mind of this particular YouTuber. I mean, he used to be a big deal. He's a pretty popular guy. I could check his subscriber count, but thank you again for your contribution. Noel for $2, classic, arguing with himself. This is also a thing, and this is the thing you see in ContraPoints too, is that progressives love a dialectic, they love a conversation, but outside of PragerU, and even the people who are featured in PragerU, I'm pretty sure could defend their ideas much better than their sort of soundbite versions of this, the sort of soundbite versions of themselves that play in their little 10-minute infotainment videos with the stick figures. But I think what's happening, and I think the reason why you get there's sort of two types of progressive. Oh, well, there's three types. There's sort of like the academic Marxists, like Cuck Philosophy and Zero Books, and the people who are all into reading abstract authors and making third or fourth level arguments about hypothetical systems that they really don't know how they'll work. They're not even skilled in, they don't even have degrees in economics, and even an economist couldn't make a prediction like that. But there's those videos. There's the academic left videos that are about serious academics. Then there's the less popular, like Sean and Jen videos, where Sean and Jen, they what they do is they make like these cheap arguments, these cheap sort of gotcha arguments. Three Arrows is in this thing too. They sort of nitpick conservative points, and then they run away laughing. You can kind of see like they kind of, I think their fans even understand that the arguments don't hold up. Like, for instance, they'll make an argument against Jordan Peterson. And, I keep on saying I'm no fan of Jordan Peterson, and I really should make an anti-Jordan Peterson video at some point. I just don't feel like I feel like I disagree with him for really boring reasons, so that's why I'm resistant to make it. But his argument against Jordan Peterson was that Jordan Peterson, he phrased the Holocaust as if committing the final solution was detrimental to the Nazi war effort, when really it was beneficial to the Nazi war effort. And this obfuscation means that Jordan Peterson sympathizes with the Nazis, but not actually. And that's the entire video. Basically, it's nitpicking and then trying to insinuate that something nefarious is behind the nitpicking. And then after sort of the nitpicking videos like Sean and Jen and Three Arrows, you have the main genre is the progressive arguing with themselves. Innuendo Studios and ContraPoints. And I think what these videos do is they're essentially a pantomime. They're a pantomime for the conversations that progressives thought they would be getting from the culture war generally, but since have been since they've been kind of denied these dialogue opportunities with people that they can actually win against, they're forced to kind of construct theatrical representations of how the ideal progressive argument would be if they controlled all of the variables. And of course, this is the reason why there's not a video of Innuendo Studios actually arguing against a right-winger who's reasonably intelligent. There's not a video against ContraPoints, at least not for the last 2 years, debating against a conservative who had the opposite position. As a matter of fact, I speculate that the only reason why ContraPoints ever talked to me was that he saw I was Catholic, and based on his Jon Stewart view of the world, he assumed that Christian means stupid person, and he thought he could score an easy point on me by basically rehashing Dan Savage points that I'd heard 1,000 times before. It obviously didn't work out that way, and after that happened, he concocted every reason in the book not to actually continue the conversation. Son of Tiamat for $5. Thank you very much for your contribution. I think this guy is an unaware solophist. They're the main character and everyone else's are NPCs. Well, that's definitely the message. I mean, Innuendo Studios' message is certainly this is that everyone else on the right is a non-player character, not worth the time, so on and so forth. Is this right? Please at me with this. Is this the guy who was on CNN talking about the joys of polyamory and how being feminist made it better because his wife was not restricted by his own selfish patriarchal desires? Was this the guy? It was, right? The chat can correct me on that. I don't want to run down the guy's reputation on this, but I'm pretty sure that was the guy on CNN who had that opinion. Again, I would have researched this if this was a real video. If so, I mean, maybe he should be the person called Cuck Philosophy. Okay, well, I'm not saying that. I'm just going to go on with the video here.
See, I don't take you at your word because I cannot form a coherent worldview out of the things you say.
Oh man, would he allow that for the left? If I could find contradictory opinions on the left over every issue, then could I dismiss any left-wing thinker because of generally incoherent opinions that came out of the movement?
So forgive me if when you tell me what you believe, I don't think you're being candid with me. It kinda seems like you're playing games, and I'm the opposing team, and anyone who's against me is your ally. And you're not really taking a position, but claiming to believe in whatever would need to be true in order to score points against me. Like we're in that one episode of Seinfeld.
Who invaded Spain in the 8th century?
That's a joke. The Moors.
Oh, no. I'm so sorry, it's the Moops. The correct answer is the Moops.
That's not moops, you jerk. It's Moors. It's a misprint.
I'm sorry, the card says Moops.
Okay, so the message is conservatives are just sophists. I mean, he didn't say sophists, I think, because there's this stereotype, and it's a true stereotype, and it's based on something. Sort of and I was a little bit like this in college too. The kid that takes like one rhetoric class or one formal logic class, and he goes around, because people use sort of informal fallacies in their everyday speech, he goes around calling out everyone's fallacies, and then calls them sophists. And so I think that if he called conservatives sophists, as opposed to using the sort of edgier, and I hesitate to say edgy when it comes to a show that came out 20 years ago, but the edgier Seinfeld reference, then I think that it would be obvious that what he's doing is sort of using like a very classic philosophy student argument, which is to call your opponents sophists. Sophistry is a thing. It exists in the real world, but very few qua positions are composed entirely of sophists. So while it's a good reason to stop talking with a particular person, sophistry, it's almost never a good justification for not engaging with an idea. And he's trying to use this to blanket condemn a certain idea. And so he has to essentially skirt around talking about fallacies and sophistry so he doesn't invoke the stereotype, and we all know what's sort of wrong with the stereotype from college.
This is borrowed observation number 1, link in the down there part. Whew, it feels good calling people hypocrites. Person says B when earlier they said A, and you point out the contradiction. You don't take a position on A or B, and you still win. I see why Republicans like this so much.
Okay, so the right... Never mind. So the Republicans are justified. Wait, that's you're contradicting yourself, Innuendo Studios. I almost called you Cuck Studios. Is the existence of hypocrisy something that disqualifies positions, or is it simply something that is a natural reality of having a multifaceted political coalition? Which one?
But that's the kind of point scoring we're here to deconstruct. So let's get analytical. There's a certain
deconstruct or participate in.
beat you at your own gaminess to the card says moops maneuver. Safe spaces are bullshit, but if you get one, I get one too. There's no such thing as systemic oppression, but if there were, I'd be oppressed.
These aren't contradictions. Safe spaces. So I can make this statement, and it's not a contradiction. A is not true, but if A were true, then A and B, right? And then A implies B. So how about this? Like, identity politics are destructive, but if we're going to have identity politics, then everyone should have identity politics. Not some groups get identity politics, and some groups are prohibited from using identity politics. That's something that I believe. With some caveats, I think that certain types of identity politics, I think in some ways all politics are identity politics, but in an ideal society, all identity politics would be moral, confessional identity politics. But we're forced through historical circumstances to rely on genetic, ethnic, and regional ones. Although I should say regional identity politics is perfectly fine. But I understand that reality is fine. This is a perfectly correct statement. To say something like let's say we're in the classic game theory criminal dilemma, right? So like you have a choice to rat out or cooperate. So you could say something like this: we should both cooperate, but if you rat me out, I'll rat you out. So that's the most basic political game in the world, the criminal's dilemma. And that statement, it's better to cooperate, but if we both cooperate, if we both defect, if you defect, all defect. That is not only a correct semantic statement, it is also a correct playing strategy for the most basic political game in the world. So there's nothing about the statements, not a, but if A, and B. That's, I mean, I'm not even going to identify. I don't think he thought this through.
It's dismissing the rhetoric of social justice while also trying to use it against you.
No, I mean, you can dismiss for something and then say that because this is the position the conservative is in. The conservative is in the position where if he says safe spaces are bullshit, you're still going to get safe spaces, right? If we say that entitlement programs are bad, you're still going to take money from entitlements. So we could condemn a thing, but then, you know, our condemnation of that's not going to change the reality. We're not in power, not nearly to the extent that the left is. So if we condemn something and then the reality changes, and we have to essentially, what we're going to do, so basically we have to just abscond. We have to basically escape from reality and just not participate in society, or we are accused of hypocrisy. The progressives get this all the time with the entitlement thing. They'll say something like, if you don't like Social Security, then just don't take your Social Security check. And if you take your Social Security check, you're a hypocrite for opposing it. Well, I am for Social Security. I'm not a libertarian, but that's bullshit logic even for libertarians. People bring this up with Ayn Rand all the time, and I didn't mention this because this is a bullshit criticism of her. She took a Social Security check, even though being morally opposed to that. But she paid into the system. More money was taken out of her paycheck over her life than the money she withdrew from Social Security. So the fact that the money was taken away from her and that she tries to recoup on it later is not a moral failing on her part. And it's just like, if you inverted this, it would be ridiculous. Go to the social justice warrior and say something like, oh, so you're against capitalism? Well, then don't get paid by corporations and don't get food from corporations. Like, eat out of food banks and just go on welfare. I mean, progressives understand that that's bullshit. Like, in saying that to disqualify people from opposition to capitalism is bullshit.
Claiming the card says moops does not so much mean I believe the people who invaded Spain in the 8th century were literally called the moops, but rather, you can't prove I don't believe it. Not a statement of sincere belief, simply moving a piece across the board.
AKA sophism, but he doesn't want to use that word.
All in the game, yo. If they could be so nakedly honest with you and themselves to answer, what do you actually believe, truthfully?
I wonder what Innuendo Studios actually believes. Has he released a single video on his own beliefs? I don't think he has. And he's a person. I think I've talked more about my beliefs than Innuendo Studios has, and he's got like 100K subscribers.
One suspects the answer would be, what difference does it make? We're right either way. This has come to be known as postmodern conservatism, a fact I find hilarious.
Why? We are in postmodernity. Any kind of conservatism is going to be postmodern. And if you are a reactionary and have problems with modernity, then any kind of reaction will certainly be postmodern.
Because in the discourse, postmodernism is a dog whistle for everything the right hates about the left. It also means Jews.
I don't know. I mean, the neocons talk a lot about it.
Postmodern conservatism is the thinking that, at least for the purpose of argument, the truth of who invaded Spain is immaterial. You have your facts, I have alternative facts. What is true? Who's to say? Regardless of what you actually...
And this is effective, and this basically is PragerU level at this stage. I mean, this is sort of a relativism that is always impugned upon your opponents, but no one actually embraces in real life because it would destroy all discourse.
Actually believe what you believe, serving no rhetorical purpose, you are at least arguing from the position that material truth does not exist. Truth is a democracy. Whoever wins the argument decides who invaded Spain.
Is this a critique of democracy then?
It would be reductive to blame this pattern of thought on the internet, but its recent proliferation isn't really extricable from the rise of Chan culture. This is borrowed observation number 2, link in the down there part. 4chan didn't cause this way of thinking, but sites like 4chan reveal it in its most concentrated form. The 2 most common properties of a Chan board will be anonymity and lack of moderation, which means, among other things, that you can say whatever you want with no systemic or social repercussions. People may disagree with you, but it carries no weight. You won't be banned, you won't have your comments deleted, and because there's no way to know whether any 2 posts are made by the same person, you won't even get a reputation as the person with the bad opinion.
Boy, I'm glad that not all right-wing thought comes out of 4chan.
The effect this has on the community is that there is no expectation in any given moment that the person on the other end of a conversation isn't messing with you. You can't know whether they mean what they say or are only arguing as though they mean what they say. And entire debates may just be a single person stirring the pot. Such a community will naturally attract people who enjoy argument for its own sake and will naturally trend towards the most extreme version of any opinion. In short, this is the free marketplace of ideas. No code of ethics, no social mores, no accountability.
I don't know. I mean, this is the thing. The free marketplace of ideas, like open discourse, was something that progressives liked until very recently, until they figured out that they just couldn't win it. And now the free marketplace of ideas is 4chan.
A Darwinist petri dish where ideas roam free and only the strong ones survive. If the community agrees Bebop is better than Ava, well then I guess Bebop is better than Ava because there wasn't any outside influence polluting the discourse. Granted, it could just be a lot of people thought it was funny to shit on Ava, but it's what the community has decided, so it will at least be treated as truth.
Does anyone else find it weird that I haven't watched anime in like 20 years? And the stuff that's popular now is still the stuff that was made when I was in high school. That's weird, right? I mean, we're still talking about 90s anime.
This demands that one be both highly opinionated and to assume opinions are bullshit, to place a high premium on consensus, and be intensely distrustful of groupthink. A common means of straddling these lines is what I call the Stanislavski opinion. The opinion you entertain so completely that you functionally believe it while you express it, no matter the possibility that you will express, and to an extent believe, an opposite opinion later.
How many more words do we need for sophism that aren't sophism?
Most of us go through a phase in our youths where we're online and like the idea of believing in something, but don't know what to believe just yet. So we pick a position and find out if we believe it by defending it. We try on ideologies like sunglasses off a rack. Now, most of us will eventually settle on a belief system, and this will usually involve some apologies and some comments we wish we could scrub from the internet, but it's an important stage of growing up.
Again, what is Innuendo Studios' position? Is he an anarchist? I mean, I know he's progressive, but what is he, a Clintonian? Is he a Bernie bro? Is he a socialist? Is he a communist? I mean, who knows? You would never understand that by watching these videos. There's only raw criticism here. The only thing we know about is the fact that he's presumably from the left.
But some percentage of people will seek out a space where there is no embarrassment, the comments scrub themselves, and never growing out of the Stanislavski opinion is actively rewarded. There, figuring out what you believe would make your ability to argue less flexible. And besides, if you believed anything unironically, much of the community would still assume you're trolling. Where no one is bound by their word, what really is the difference between appearing to have an opinion and having one?
I think we're still on the conflation of, oh, I have a super chat, and it's getting boring. But, I mean, the video, not the super chats, but we're still on like the 5th minute of him comparing conservatives or insinuating that conservatism just comes out of 4chan. But, all right, Charlemagne for $5. Progressives like to criticize, and not talk about their own beliefs, because then people will understand how terrible they are. I know, and I'm going to talk about this very topic when we finally get to the end of this video. But I feel like I'm obligated to at least watch this video to the end so that we have so that we have a video in completion to talk about, and so that it doesn't seem like I'm skipping over portions of this. But the left really won by essentially pure negation. Their winning philosophy, there wasn't an idea from the left that took America by storm. It was simply them slowly deconstructing and criticizing every normative element of modern American society. They basically raised and re-raised a critique again and again and again against the conservative pillars of a society, and then they were just there to inherit the collapse. Now, I'm not so sure that conservatives, well, I know that conservatives can't do this, but I'm not so sure that reactionaries can look forward to being the inheritors in such a similar collapse. Although we might take measures to insulate ourselves in some kind of eventuality. But I'll talk more about this at the end of this stream. Odysseus I for $5 says, the scariest thing for the left is the idea that the right has a point on anything. Another great point. That's Odysseus I for £5. Well, thank you very much. I think earlier someone gave me euros and I called it pounds. I constantly confuse the symbols, but this is definitely pounds. Yeah, that's a great point. This is why this narrative, I think, is going to fail. The superposition of these conservative beliefs next to 4chan has been something that the left has been using to discount reactionary ideas for a very long time. Because of the strict punishments put in place against people who were on the distant right, the fact that these opinions were coming out of only anonymous accounts means that people like Innuendo Studios can tell whatever story they want about people who hold them. This will eventually end, and you can already see it beginning to end with Tucker Carlson. My prediction is you're really not going to see a person like ContraPoints or Innuendo Studios, although I could be wrong, do a video on Tucker Carlson. Because to do a video on Tucker Carlson, or anybody from sort of the moderate end of the distant right, is to essentially talk about a position that everybody in America knows needs to be discussed and part of the mainstream dialogue. And once you admit that that's a large part of the right wing, you have to admit that the right wing needs to enter the conversation. And once the right wing enters the conversation, you can't have imaginary conversations between ContraPoints in varying costumes, or I almost said cut philosophy, but Innuendo Studios little cartoon characters. That's no longer going to work. Although I don't know what I'm saying. I mean, ContraPoints already kind of made a mocking video. I think several mocking videos about Jordan Peterson, and it seemed to work perfectly fine. Not that they'll ever engage with Peterson, but I digress.
Sincerity is unprovable and open to interpretation. Decide someone is sincere if you want to make fun of them. Decide they're trolling if you want to make fun of someone else.
Isn't that what you're doing here?
What is true? What do you want to be true? It's easy enough to start thinking of one's own opinions the same way. What do I believe? What is advantageous to believe? Your answer isn't binding. You'll change it later if you need to. The person I'm describing, you spend time online, you'll meet him a lot.
And he's not always on the right. Although, can I say that? Again, I don't know. I mean, like, you can say, okay, well, there's unprincipled sophists online. Okay. Welcome to the internet circa 2001.
His name is Schrodinger's douchebag. Borrowed observation number 3, link in the down there part. A guy who says offensive things and decides whether he was joking based on the reaction of people around him. Any website that lacks effective moderation and allows some level of anonymity will, to varying degrees, approximate 4chan and be overrun with Schrodinger's douchebag. Now, when this type of person defends, for instance, rape jokes by saying all humor is inherently punching down because there must be a butt to every joke, he hasn't thought about it. He assumes it's true because he figures he's a smart guy and whatever he assumes is probably right, but he's unfazed if you prove otherwise.
This is I can't. So the comeback to this is that you should that the not punching down humor is puns, knock jokes, absurdism, and wholesome memes. This is essentially the problem that evangelical Christian humor had in the 90s. The fact that they could do absolutely nothing edgy and were constantly confined to the middle of any Overton window discourse. And because of that, it was totally inaccessible and bland. But of course, I mean, the question initially kind of was almost a strong point. But I don't know. I mean, just if you think about classically funny humors, classically funny movies, and you start bringing the punching down to them, you'll immediately see that they contain many jokes that are not punching up. Even though that formulation is kind of ridiculous given the power differentials between progressives and conservatives. But we'll keep going.
There's no shortage of dodgy reasons he might be right and you wrong. He'll just pick another one. What matters is the game continues. The thing is, Bob, it's not that they're lying, it's that they just don't care. I'll say that again for the cheap seats. When they make these kinds of arguments, they legitimately do not care whether the words coming out of their mouths are true.
Yet another reason not to interact with the right wing. It really is funny that the most notable progressive. There's 2 horror movies that came out this year. 2 horror movies that I remember. The first one was A Quiet Place, and this was distinctly reactionary in its tone and also its symbolism. And this reactionary movie featured aliens or demons or some kind of monster that would attack you if you said anything. And so it was this Christian family, and they're Christian because you see them praying, who has to exist in a world where they're in utter silence and they have to communicate really only through implicit signing and in expressions. And then the sort of progressive horror movie that I remember from 2018 was Birdcage, which is, I think it's Sandra Bullock. Yeah, it's Sandra Bullock, right? And in this world, the demons or monsters will destroy you. They'll cause you to go insane if you look at them. So, okay, it's already sort of a copy of M. Night Shyamalan's, was it The Happening or something like that? But now the thing is that, this is sort of the 2 symbols. The conservatives are worried about being destroyed because they say the wrong thing. The progressives are worried about going insane if they look at the scare. You can't look at the information. You can't look at the news outside. You can't look at conservative arguments. Otherwise, you'll get driven insane or killed or something bad will happen. It's Bird Box. Okay, sorry, Bird Box, right? Bird Box. Yeah, Birdcage is that movie with Robin Williams. But it's such a perfect symbol of where the 2 sides are in the discourse right now. One who believes that they can't express what they want to express for fear of reprisal. The other one knowing that they cannot perceive what is true or there'll be a reprisal. And that really just, it perfectly sort of encapsulates the difference between the left and the right in contemporary discourse.
If they cared, before they said something is true, they would look it up. So it's kind of funny, right? How many of these folks self-identify?
Look it up, shitlord. Educate yourself. Every time I've been in positions, and when you're online long enough, you do get frustrated having to kind of go back to square one and like, okay, like why does neoconservatism and mainstream conservatism not work? Part 173. And like I've been through this argument so many times. How could you have not seen other videos on this? Fine, we'll go back to the beginning and I'll explain from square one. And it's frustrating, but at the same time, it is, and this isn't my job, but it is what this part-time job of YouTube is about. I mean, I'm supposed to be educating people, and I can't see someone be wrong about something and go like, well, look it up, educate yourself. It's not my job to do the emotional labor of making sure you're right. So why are you talking to me? I mean, go watch something or talk to people you agree with. I mean, discourse is about education and about rectifying wrong beliefs. So you can't. It's not legitimate, and I emotionally, I guess it is, but it goes nowhere as part of an actual element of communication.
As rationalists. I mean, typical rational thinking would say, if I am presented with the truth, I will believe it. And once I believe it, I will defend it in argument. This is not that. This is a different idea of rationality that views it not as a practice, but as an innate quality one either possesses or lacks, like being blonde or left-handed.
Or on the right side of history.
If I'm arguing it, I must believe it because I'm a rational person. And if I believe it because I'm a rational person, it must be true. You speak assuming you're right. And should you take a new position, this telescopes out into a whole new set of beliefs with barely a thought. Stay focused on the argument, you won't even notice it's happening.
I mean, this is a real phenomenon. I mean, people do this. It just not, there's no relationship this has to the right wing. This is just, if you use this as a post hoc way of explaining why your opponents are wrong, you'll literally discount interaction with any person you disagree with. Like, okay, well, they're doing motivated reasoning. Well, guess what? It's more than likely you're doing motivated reasoning as well.
You might now conclude that the internet reactionary believes in nothing except winning arguments with liberals. And like Newtonian physics, if you assume this framing, you will get highly useful results. If you enter conversation with Engelbert and Charlemagne believing they do not mean what they say, they are only entertaining notions, and on a long enough timeline they will eventually defend a position fundamentally incompatible with the one they defended earlier in the same argument, you will navigate that conversation much more effectively.
Why would you even have a conversation if you thought the person who was talking to you didn't believe what they were saying? And that it's insane. Why would you have that conversation? I mean, it's an excuse not to have the conversation. And that's what every video of this series is trying to communicate, is why you shouldn't talk to right wingers, because we're in the bird box. We can't look outside and see what's going on. Otherwise, we're afraid we'll be turned in to what we think is hateful. And that's, I think that's literally what the white progressive, the white liberal is going through right now psychologically.
But, like Newtonian physics, this framing is lowercase a accurate without being capital T true. In reality, nihilism isn't that popular. People will tell...
I don't know. We were implying that it comprises, 35% of the American population?
Tell you, I don't care about anything. I just like triggering the libs. But why is it always libs? It is piss easy and also hilarious to upset conservatives. Why only go after the SJWs? The simple answer is, well, if you upset a feminist, you might make her cry. If you upset a Nazi, he might stab you. And
I really don't think that our friend at Innuendo Studios thinks he is in danger of being stabbed by making this video series on the alt-right playbook. This is insane. And the feminist, I guess she won't stab you. She will go after your job. That's actually fairly reliable. And this is something that's happened to everybody who's been online and in the counter-progressive movement. You've had crazy people who've threatened your livelihood, your family's safety for having opinions that have been counter-progressive in nature. Because they think that, oh, well, we need to out you as somebody who's a danger to the community. And Antifa will literally say this. They'll literally threaten violence. They will literally threaten doxing. We have YouTubers who effectively endorse this. So I don't know. I mean, you wonder, like, what is Innuendo Studios risking? Really nothing. There's asymmetry here, but it's in the opposite direction.
That has a cooling effect. But the more obvious answer is that they actually agree with the racist MRA and TERF talking points they repeat, but would rather not think about it. So much of conservative rhetoric is about maintaining ignorance of one's own beliefs. To uphold the institution of imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy while thinking you are none of those things. Well, okay.
No one identifies with these labels. And this is the thing, like, again, I'm surprised, like, this picture itself, used unironically, is another reason why I think that this is probably the progressive version of PragerU. Imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy, it's a cliche, it's stale. Everyone knows that none of these titles people actually apply to themselves, except maybe capitalist.
Knowing you're a capitalist, but thinking it's a good thing. Most people...
Okay. Well, I mean, this is the thing. Like, okay, so, like, he's like, oh, well, capitalists, they think they're so delusional. They think being a capitalist is being a good thing. Well, most progressives are capitalists. If you want to create Sweden in America, you're a capitalist. Sweden is a capitalist country. Hillary Clinton is a capitalist. Unless you're a literal socialist and not the kind that just wants to have a large progressive tax rate, but actually wants to nationalize industry and get rid of private business, then you're a capitalist. So you have to wonder, just, I mean, I guess I'm sitting here going like, oh my God, how unaware is Innuendo Studios? I guess so.
People have a baseline of fairly conventional kindergarten morality, and conservatism often clashes with it. You can rationalize these contradictions. I'm not a bigot, I just believe in states' rights. But as American conservatism gets more radical, it gets harder to square one's politics with what one assumes to be one's beliefs. So you learn, when someone challenges you, to cycle through beliefs until something sticks. Just play your hand and trust that you're right.
I mean, I can't tell you how many progressives can't tell me if they're capitalist or not. I don't even think Innuendo Studios knows if he's capitalist or not, or he has a vague definition of socialism that comprises both low regulation, high welfare state Sweden organizations and literal communism. If that's not belief cycling, I don't know what is.
Or, in extreme cases, insist you have no beliefs at all, you're just here to watch the world burn.
Mr. Medicare?
But they're not. They are willing participants in the burning of only certain parts. They don't care what they believe, but they know what they hate, and they...
Well, isn't this a perfect example? They don't know what they believe, but they know what they hate. These two women or this woman and this non-gendered individual are both part of the progressive coalition. The only thing that keeps the conservative Muslim and the transgender in the same coalition is the fact that they both dislike white Christian men and white Christian women. That's the only reason why they're in the coalition together, is their dislike of a certain group, of a certain majority group. They have nothing in common otherwise. Absolutely nothing. And that this is I mean, is it worth pointing out hypocrisy? Perhaps not. This is just, again, it's a negative position to present a perspective, I guess. But it's ironic that they use this picture.
They don't want to think about why they hate it. On paper, they believe in freedom of religion and freedom of expression, but they also hang out in communities where Muslims and trans women are punching bags. And like a 6th grader who believes one thing in Sunday school and another thing in biology class, they believe different things at different times. This flexibility of belief is fertile ground for far-right recruitment. I'd say the jury is out on whether Chan boards attract...
I don't know. I'm not even going to point out the hypocrisy anymore. I'm just going to let it go, guys.
Far-right extremists, or
Send me super chats. I'll answer those.
are built to attract far-right extremists, but they're where extremists congregate and organize because they're where extremists are tolerated, and where they blend in with the locals. They learn the lingua franca of performative irony. Say what you mean in such a way that people who disagree think you're kidding, and people who agree think you're serious. People who don't know what they believe, but clearly have some fascist leanings, don't need to be convinced of Nazi rhetoric. They just need to be submerged in it and encouraged to hate liberals. They'll make their way right on their own. Folks start using extremist rhetoric because it wins
Maybe that means they believe it.
arguments with SJWs, usually because that's the moment the SJW decides it's not fruitful and possibly unsafe talking to you. And this creates the appearance that if it keeps winning arguments, there must be something to it. The far right literally has handbooks on how to do this. Those who don't consciously embrace the ideology, who don't transition from participating to getting recruited, are still useful. They spread the rhetoric, they pad the numbers, and often participate in harassment and sometimes even violence. There's a twisted elegance to all this. Think about it. If you operate as though there is no truth, just competing opinions, and as though opinions aren't sincere, just tools to be picked up and dropped depending on their utility, then what are you operating under?
I have a super chat, probably more interesting than the rest of this asinine video. But I mean, the video is the existence of the video is interesting. The going through the entire thing is not so much. But we only have a few minutes more, so it won't be too bad to continue going. Dude, what is your... So, Son of Tiamat for $5 says, dude, what is your beef with Medicare? He's not a nihilist. I don't think I ever said he was a nihilist. For pointing out other people's hypocrisy or wanting to have fun on the internet. No, I've never accused him of nihilism. I've accused him of cynicism, which is different than nihilism. Nihilism is not believing anything. Cynicism is believing that everyone is shitty and that it's not worth it trying to save anyone. And I do think Medicare is a cynic, and I think he's a cynic because he's literally told me that, or he's literally told, not me personally, but he's literally told this audience that he thinks the world is screwed and that the people who are trying to change things, you know, are not going to succeed, and that's perfectly fine. I mean, it's you know, that's just an assessment of reality. Is cynicism a moral failing? No, not really. I mean, it's a statement. I mean, some forms of cynicism are just a statement of fact, like, or they're factual, or they're just prognoses about the universe. Like, it's a fact that most people are pretty shitty. I mean, even I'm pretty shitty. You know, I've got huge defects in my character, and then it's also a fact that the prospects of regenerating civilization without a disaster at this state are slim, you know, and it would be a prognosis on top of that to say, oh, well, it's a hopeless cause. I mean, that, and you know, he's a great entertainer. I think he's really funny. He happened to release a video on BioShock. Well, I guess it was the hamster version of BioShock the same day I released a video on BioShock, and that's kind of sort of a strange juxtaposition there. But it's he's the reason why I feel like I need to call him out for his cynicism, because if you're a person who's like, oh, look, isn't it easier for Medicare to make fun of Sargon when Sargon does something and fails at it, like tries to participate in politics or tries to do in real life organizing? There's a lot to criticize about Sargon's in real life organizing in his political career, but he's trying to do something. And it's always easier to stand back and laugh at people failing than it is to do something yourself. And for that reason, I'm not going to give him brownie points because he can point and laugh at people who are trying to do something hard and them failing. Like, I know it's funny. Like, you know, making fun of people when they fail is funny. But at some point, the right wing and the online right is going to need to actually take risks and do things that could result in embarrassing dynamics embarrassing interactions, and that's the only way we're ever going to move forward. So I always have to bring up that cynical element of Medicare when I talk about his interaction with the political sphere on YouTube, because I don't think he's like me. I think he's not even like Black Pigeon Speaks. I don't think he cares about what's. I think he cares in a sense, but I think he's fundamentally an entertainer, and maybe I'm wrong about that, and someone can change my mind. But I think he would say that he's just an entertainer.
Self-interest, the desire to win. You'll defend the Holocaust just to feel smarter than someone, superior. Think how beautifully that maps onto the in-group, out-group mentality of dominance and bigotry.
Oh yeah, there's no in-group, out-group dynamics here.
And think how incompatible it is with liberal ideas of tolerance.
Whoa, are you a liberal? That means you're a capitalist, dude.
I think this is why we don't see a lot of these "I'm just here to fuck shit up" types on the left. Don't get me wrong, the left has gotten on some bullshit, but accepting politicians whom you should never assume mean anything they say, it's sincerely believed bullshit.
Yeah, right.
We don't build these around saying things just to piss people off. The takeaway from all this is not only that you can't tell the difference between a bigot who doesn't know they're a bigot and a bigot who knows but won't tell you, but that there is no line dividing the two. When some guy in the middle of a harassment campaign says the victims should be nicer to their harassers because that will mend the rift, I don't know if he believes it. But in that moment, he believes it.
Wasn't this the same though as there's a bunch of people, was it from Crowdserver? They were like, Sargon, you have to be nicer to Patreon. Like, be nicer to Jack Conte and maybe you'll get your channel back, Sargon. Like, I was just cringing at that. Like it was I don't know, like, okay, I mean, I should probably spend more time on this, but this is something that a certain moderate group, especially the David Sherratt Woz Lee group, have been doing a lot of, which is they sort of play off the status quo and just they try to present disruptions in the status quo that are generated by people who stand out of line, like Sargon in the Patreon incident, and present that as moral failings. And it comes off, it gives me, maybe if we're on the same side of this, that with Innuendo Studios, that there maybe maybe this is what people were feeling in Gamergate from the left side, although I don't think their case was as good as this. I mean, it's ridiculous. It was obvious from the get-go that Patreon had no desire to restore Sargon's service. The case was made to them again and again and again. They doubled down in official statement after official statement after official statement. And this was the direction we had going forward. The fact that if Sargon bent down and prostrated himself before Jack Conte, he deigned to give his account back, destroys the whole reason of having a free speech platform to begin with. If I have to bow before Jack Conte in order to know that I can successfully get my opinion out here and campaign against people like him, then I'm effectively not getting money in a free speech platform. Send a TM up for $5. Thank you for your contribution. I hate that trying to do something argument. It's a cheap cop-out and a red herring for Sargon's own moral defects. Dude, I'm not in charge of Sargon's moral defects. Like, I admit Sargon's got defects, right? Like, I admit he's got defects, but I'm not, like, you don't have me on the hook for Sargon's defects. You have Sargon on the hook for Sargon's defects insofar as they exist. So you can talk to Sargon about what your problem is about him. But in the meantime, I am going to point out that if you care about the world we live in and you want to see counter-progressive organizing, it's going to have to come through some mechanism. And whether you like Sargon or not, you have to admit that the most organization we've had in the last 4 months inside the dissident right has been around his banning from Patreon. Now, I know he didn't do anything smart to procure this dynamic, but whatever it is, his existence on the stage facilitated an interaction with the corporate left that just needed to happen. And it got Jordan Peterson and the dissident right and the Tucker Carlson types and the Republicans and National Review and the moderates all on the same side against Jack Conte and Christy Winters and the David Sherratt crowd. And that's the dynamic that we need to play again and again and again. Now, maybe it's like Inspector Gadget, right? Maybe Sargon he happens to be in the right place in the right time, and he just falls over and happens to accomplish what needs to be accomplished. But he is taking the discourse forward to where we need, and he's trying to do that. So whether it's due to his virtues or not, I have to acknowledge that his role in the dialogue is fundamentally different than that of Medicare. Medicare is not trying to do what Sargon's trying to do. He's trying to entertain people, and he's doing a great job at it. I think Medicare is more entertaining than Sargon, but that's not, he by his own admission is not trying to accomplish manifest furtherance of a counter-progressive goal materially in things like our contest with funding platforms. I have a super chat that's off topic, but I'm going to take this after I finish this thing because I'm almost done, but let's just go through the rest of this.
And that scares the shit out of me. But if you're asking how many...
It doesn't, but okay.
layers of irony he's on as compared with the actual harassers, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't matter. Borrowed observation number 4 is we are what we pretend to be.
I think that's actually C.S. Lewis, but I'm gonna, that's just the theme music, right? Oh yeah, he's just asking for, oh hey, look, white fascism is another video of his. I guess it's better than black fascism? I don't... Or was prone count as white fascism? I'll go on. I'm going to answer the super chat, and then I'm going to kind of talk about this video and the dynamic that's emerging between the left and the right. Raul Mercado for $50 Mexican says, hey Dave, a little off topic, but what's your opinion on the SSPX? I have no personal interaction with the SSPX. He's the SSPX, I guess that I prefer organizations like the FSSP, the Fraternal Society of St. Peter. I've had very good interactions with people from that organization. The SSPX, I've encountered some highly devout Catholics from the SSPX. Not encountered in real life. When I say I had no interaction with, I meant I've never actually met them in real life. But online, I've met people who've claimed to be SSPX who've been very pious and gracious. I've also met total kooks from there. And I know from media interactions that there are some kooks and some highly pious people. So I certainly wouldn't condemn them. But, I think that we need something that's a little bit broader in the Catholic Church. The SSPX is not in a position to have their perspective take the helm inside the Catholic Church. Maybe, I think the real hope in the Catholic Church right now, first of all, they violated a core tenet of the church about appointing bishops, which is, I think, a red flag. But we need to have people who are more measured come into power in the church, more along the Dominican model. Comment says, I'm not trying to get you on the hook, and Sargon keeps punching right. He's doing more harm than good ultimately. You have to bring up specifics. The last significant thing Sargon did was kick off the Patreon debacle, which is a fight that needed to happen. It actually needed to happen years ago, but I'm glad that Sargon initiated that. When was the last time Sargon punched right? I need to bring up something, guys. Like, punching right, like, the instinct is good, but I think people misapply it. Punching right isn't using it in a correct way. What we would say is we don't do shitty political game playing to the right. right? We're not David Sherratt. We don't do the Kraut style shenanigans against people to the right. What we do is we argue with people from the right. Like saying no punching to the right, translating that as never disagree publicly with anyone to your right is unsustainable. What we want to communicate is this. Like if someone to my right, like Millennial Woes, gets taken off of social media, right? Like I'll stand up for him, even though I have very key disagreements with him on a number of important issues that I express publicly. Nonetheless, we will stand together against the corporations and against the government that is in power for the furtherance of right-wing ideas that need to come to pass at the macro level. So I'll have solidarity, but I'm not going to agree with everyone to my right just so I don't punch right. To my knowledge, Sargon has not, I mean, we've had insinuations that he's been involved in what some people have called quote unquote gay ops against people further to the right, but so far nothing's ever been proven and they look highly suspect to me. Even the people who really believe them. I've had Coach Red Pill try to explain this to me why he was involved in this stuff, and it didn't go anywhere. It looked like it was thin as hell. And to my knowledge, Sargon disagrees in debates to his right. He does not organize cynical political ploys or sophistic counter signaling against them, to my knowledge. I mean, I guess counter signaling, I mean that in a particular way. I mean that in sort of the way that Innuendo Studios was using it, in the kind of way that, like, and everyone has principles that they believe in and are proud of, and they contrast themselves to their opposition, and that's a sort of a counter signal, so to speak, right? But there's a difference between that and saying something that's like, you kind of know isn't true, and then using that as a token to counter signal. So a good example of that is to be like, Caitlyn Jenner is a woman, Dave, a woman. And not only that, she's stunning and beautiful. I mean, like, there's one claim that even if your worldview was true would be completely subjective, followed up by some subjective opinions that almost nobody holds in real life. So, yeah, we've got to come up with better words to express the boundary, because people like Sargon are very useful, and I think that they do quality things. People like David Sherratt and Waz and that crowd are hopeless. They're not hopeless, but they're not worth interacting with. I mean this interaction, it's just, and I see we have LSP. I mean, this whole Black Pigeon Speaks thing was a perfect example of that. For instance, like Black Pigeon Speaks, he ran a red flag and did not properly brackets his quotes. And these were inside videos where he was saying, hey, look, guys, I'm taking this lecture from this person's ideas in the comment section. This is what I'm giving you if you read the low bar. And then, like, he has like he reads from their work for a few minutes, for like 30 seconds on end. If that was in print, would that be a huge problem? Yes. If it's in a lecture format, not really. I've had professors read from textbooks before in class, and those classes were recorded and they were put on YouTube. The professor did not lose his tenor. He was not canned. He was not disciplined. Spoken word does not have the same citation measures as does written words. That's why people can read things publicly and not have to include a footnote inserted into every 5-minute period. They don't have to footnote it. And this is just how academics works. And then what we have on top of that is we have about 20 accusations made by between LSP and Kraut, and like half of them are false. Okay, well, I mean, okay, so Black Pigeon Speaks, like, if you're looking for if we're being serious academicians here, right? Like, serious, like, this is serious, like, this is YouTube, like, YouTube's serious academics. Like, if this is serious academics, guys, then you have to publicly, in order for me to expect Black Pigeon to publicly flagellate himself for his lack of bracketing, you need to publicly flagellate yourselves for falsely accusing him of plagiarism on the 5 times that we can show that you are wrong about that. So is this serious or is it not? Of course, they don't care. They don't care if it's serious or not. They just want Black Pigeon Speaks off the platform. And this has been demonstrated again and again and again that these people are doing this stuff. I mean, they're doing the thing that Innuendo Studios is complaining about. They're being sophists. They're treating this as a political game and not as an actual discussion to discern the truth. If we're going to start applying academic standards, you're trying to wring something out of Black Pigeon Speaks. Hey, he'll apologize for that and include a disclaimer inside his low bar, and you will publicly admit that you falsely accused him of plagiarism in 4 different occasions, right? Then so this is the thing. Like, you can't apply a standard and then let yourself off the hook for the same standard. So okay, so, yeah, I mean, like, these accusations about, swatting and stuff, like, I'll have to see some evidence for that, really, I will. You know, I mean, like, we've had a lot of accusations that were brought against Medicare and Sargon, and, like, half of them have been false, right? Like, these things, they're not holding up well, at least to the scrutiny that I've applied. It's getting to the point where, like, accusations come out and I'm just, like, not believing them anymore on their surface. You know, I mean, I guess this is why open dialogue and trust is so important. It's because, like, you know, if I make an accusation and I get it wrong, I hope that I can come online and I say, like, look, I was seriously wrong, you guys. I owe Sargon, Black Pigeon Speaks, God forbid, David Sherratt, an apology. You know, this is where I was wrong, and that's where we're going forward from. And even better, I could talk with them, and then we could discern where we're wrong and where we're right, and hash this out in real time. So you as an audience could actually benefit from it, and that would be even better. But no, instead we're kind of reduced to this to this game where people score points on each other in third party platforms and then try to, like, pretend like they're not part of a larger conversation. I mean, I brought up objections to half of the things that LSP, I think this was even before he went on that was it the kill stream? He went on I think I brought up counterpoints to that. And, like, when I brought up, like, counterpoints, he just, like, memed at me. Like, I mean, come on, dude, right? Like, and so like, do you want to be able to make accusations about people not, like, having high standards, or are standards just for everyone else? Right? Let's acknowledge each other as equals and talk about how to raise the standards of this platform generally, and understand that it's coming from a very, very low standard and that we need to have forgiveness. It can't be like Black Pigeon Speaks had a red flag, therefore we should get him banned off the platform, and I want to get him banned off the platform. I mean, we literally have, LSP at least saying that to me once, right? So, I said enough about this topic. The thing is that honest discourse needs to take place on the right, and it's currently not taking place. And and not punching right does not mean disagreeing with the right. It means don't politically organize and use dishonest tactics and then stand in solidarity with the right when there's organized corporate or governmental attempts to shut down the discourse on the right. Okay, so that's the oh yeah, and I see you, LSP, but no. Like, running interference is posting memes. It's not engaging in the conversation. I offered you the conversation and you declined it with memes. So yeah. I mean, I think we've demonstrated from our interactions online exactly where this stands. And I think everyone can see this now. So it's no dice, man. So I wanted to talk a little bit leading off here, and if you have any questions or anything you want me to talk about, I should be on for 20 more minutes. I have a stop at 7:00. Although I should probably get off before, but I'll stay until 6:30. We can talk a little bit about whatever people super chat or ask me. But I want to talk a little bit about the Innuendo Studios thing. I think Innuendo Studio is ContraPoints before ContraPoints existed. I think it was, and ContraPoints and Innuendo Studios are what Samantha Bee and Jon Stewart are after they get off of cable and they can't control the dialogue anymore. So this is where it goes at. The progressive and the liberal progressive side doesn't want to have a conversation. They want to have a lecture that then they can turn around and turn into a conversation. And the way they do that is by creating little sock puppets of the right-wingers with the little mad faces and the curved down eyebrows. And they put them up there and then they tear them down. I mean, it's literally literally kind of straw men, or in this case, paper men, right? Someone's saying I missed some super chats. I'll get them later. I'll review them at the end of this video. Okay, well. So this strategy is very good because the left controls the dialogue. They control the dialogue. They have the biggest YouTube channels on the political sphere. They actually do, if you look at it. They are certainly the best funded. And on top of that, they control the mainstream media. So they can legitimately go after this thing where they literally, I keep on saying literally, excuse me for that. They can just tell people what conservatives say. And the people pushing back from the dissident right are 4chan, anonymous media, and the alt-right, which have terrible optics and will never cut through. I think Tucker Carlson and a group of journalists and opinion makers who will follow in the wake of Tucker Carlson are going to be the end of this. I think once Tucker Carlson starts remaking the right, we're going to see that it's going to be increasingly difficult for the left to stay out of the conversation, except simply by appealing to power. The sooner we can get the left appealing strictly to power and not to any type of argument or reason or a conversation they should be a part of, the better, because that will naturally create an environment where the right is more persuasive and will have the maximum persuasive power and the left will have the minimum. And we need to bleed off everyone from the mainstream into a general counter-progressive movement that will oppose the left and eventually see the left burn itself out in its own heat death. And that's the only way we can play this game out. Consolidate a counter-progressive faction, wait for the left to burn itself out, trying its own ideas, because, well, it basically doesn't have any new ideas. All it has is status quo, we're in power, let's retry ideas that we know don't work, and if you deny anyone anything for a political reason, then you're a terrible person. That's the left in a nutshell. But let's take a look and see what super chats I missed. Here we go. These are the two I missed. Okay, so Patrick for $2 says, you skipped my super chat, but the super chat he's talking about missing is this one for $5. Thank you for both of your contributions, Patrick. Was missing the church after my friend's father's funeral. And after Covington, I'm not going back. We need a right-wing community for atheists and agnostics. Was missing the church after my friend's father's funeral. Well, do you mean after your friend's father died, you left the church? Is that what you mean? Maybe you can clarify in the chat. I do want to answer this question as earnestly as I can. But it's not clear here. I think that's what's being communicated. So I think what's being said is that he had a crisis of faith and you feel that Covington is sort of the last linchpin. And I guess I can't take that away from you. You know, death does oftentimes drive people away from faith. I don't think that Covington is a reason to leave the Catholic faith. Every conservative institution has been infiltrated at this stage. If you're saying that every institution that plays ball with the mainstream media until it's pressured by conservative activism and the truth, if they make one mistake, then I'm out and never coming back, then I think you've got a bigger, well, I wouldn't say a bigger problem than a lack of faith, because I think a lack of faith is a very bad problem. The other problem is that I mean, like, I do agree that, like, there needs to be a right-wing belief for atheists and agnostics. There needs to be a place for atheists and agnostics to come to an understanding of meaning, truth, goodness, beauty, in a context that is right-wing, in a context, in an intellectual environment that does take these ideas seriously, that is not Christianity. I do think that everyone on that path will eventually come over to Christianity, but I think that it's very important that it not be dominated on the nose by Christian apologetics, that there is a space for people to explore these ideas even outside of these sort of conversion areas. But I think that is true. And I think that as we start building up a oppositional sphere for intellectual ideas, that will be increasingly something that we will have to that will be a part of this whole thing. I think people like Trudel Tom, who's somebody who's, and Justin Murphy, who's another person who's kind of on the right and is an atheist. These are people who will probably start working towards getting more forums for this. So it will be interesting to see where that goes. And then the other super chat I missed by Brainwright for $10. Thank you very much for your contribution. Leftist arguments are for rallying other leftists. I don't know how they managed to abolish that on the right. Well, I don't think the right has a winning coalition. That's the problem. I think the reason why the left is really only talking to itself right now is the left is fully aware that in 10 years, the coalition that they have right now is going to be politically powerful enough to permanently rule the United States of America. So what's going to happen, right? Yeah, they only need to convince themselves. That's time is on their side. Unless demographics change, or unless the right radically reorganizes itself politically, they will operate without opposition in the future. And that is what it is. Yeah, I don't know. I'm seeing Liberal Sanity Project in the chat more. I mean, the guy, in addition to the whole memeing thing, his default after losing the argument was like snide comments and degradations about religious people too. So I mean, these conversations are just not worth having, you know? I mean, like, I had a lot of sympathy for LSP when JF got him on and harangued him for being Jewish. Like, that's a shitty thing to do. But then to have, like, that sympathy kind of, like, lasts as long until the same person decides that, like, he's gonna take a conversation he's losing and then turn it into, like, how he doesn't like Catholicism or Catholics. I mean, that's just shitty. And at that point, like, you know, what am I supposed to do with that? $4.99 from Rashid Abdul Salam. Please elaborate on right-wing resurgence in the U.S. The left has the hot hand with taxing rich rhetoric, anti-Trumpism, and cultural libertarianism. A right-wing resurgence in the U.S. Well, I think there is going to be a right-wing renaissance of ideas. I don't think that I think there's going to be a right-wing resurgence in the U.S. Resurgence in the sense that we can create a new community of learning and communication that that is going to come up with genuinely new ideas for how humanity can live on this planet in the future. And those ideas are going to be much more interesting than the leftist ones. I think that there's going to be a resurgence in separatist right-wing communities, but there's not going to be like a political... I disagree on Steve Turley. Like, unless you can control immigration, there's not going to be a political resurgence that's going to go faster than immigration. Most likely. I'm not ruling it out, but it's very, very unlikely that that's going to happen. So what you're going to see is a dissident right movement that's going to be very, very interesting intellectually. That's going to create separatist communities, some of which might succeed and might create the foundations for a new social order. And I think you're going to see the left take power and essentially drive the world into the ground. Because, like I said, it has no new ideas. Michael Kelly for $5. People will move right when they run government. People will move right when runaway government spending causes the financial collapse. Yeah, Michael, I'd like to think that this is always like the theory. Thank you for your contribution, by the way, for $5. But the neoconservatives thought, oh yeah, well, this next time we spend too much money, then there'll be a financial collapse, and then people will move right after there is a collapse of the financial centers. Well, really? Last time I checked, people move to the left after financial collapses. There might be a resurgence of like the reactionary, like Tucker Carlson right after a financial collapse. But if this is like, we're going to get Alan Greenspan or like or Ludwig von Mises post a spending-driven currency collapse, I really doubt it. Like when financial collapses happen in the strong sense, so much depends on the ability of leaders to contextualize what happened. It's not enough for there to be a disaster. Leaders have to be in place all throughout the culture war, all throughout the culture, I should say, all throughout the cathedral, to contextualize that disaster in terms of a story about how it happened. That's how, I mean, I hear all sorts of stories after the fact about how actually the 1929 collapse wasn't about unregulated capitalism. It was about certain regulations that were introduced, or about tariffs. And maybe that's true. But when 1929 happened, it was Roosevelt and his leftists that were in place with the narrative about what happened and why things needed to change, and that's why he succeeded. So clarification from Patrick. Thank you, because I was trying to figure out what that meant. I'm agnostic. My friend's dad's mass invoked good feelings about the church, but Covington shows the church is changing. All Covington shows you is that the church has people that are willing to cave to mainstream political media pressure. That's not new. And no matter where you are on the right, you're going to have to deal with that. We have a damn good chance of reforming the church because the foundation is strong. And just like I say, America is getting more and more progressive demographically, the church demographically is getting more and more conservative. So the leaders can do shenanigans. The old boomers can do that. But the new priests are coming from the conservative side. The new conversions are coming from the conservative Orthodox side. That institution is eventually going to be conservative. And if conservatives stand and fight this one inside the church, and I think that if you believe what the church says is true, you should fight regardless of whether you think it's a good prospect. But even for agnostics and atheists who are watching this fight from the outside, we have a good chance of winning. And this will be the foundation, the seed, the chariot for a new ideas for human social organization that will be radically different and may serve to preserve humanity in the future. I'm going to have to get off in the next 10 minutes, guys. So I'll have to say, just if you have a super chat you want to send it in the next minute or two, or 3, and I'll try to get to it. Pragmatic Culture for $5 says, opinion on Cardinal Dolan refusing to excommunicate Cuomo. Okay, so for people who are, that's for $5. Thank you for your contribution. I really appreciate it. I love Pragmatic Culture's channel, and I see him all the time on Twitter. I think that's him on Twitter. But yeah, so for those of you who haven't heard the news, New York posted an egregiously brutal abortion bill that essentially legalizes abortion throughout all 9 months, although I'm not so sure how practically it's going to work. And this was I think it was signed by Cuomo, and essentially this bill was pushed forward by heretical Catholics. I don't know what to say. I mean, we need to have an inquisition on this. Dolan is a good man. All accounts I've heard of him say that he's a good man and a pretty good and a good bishop. I don't know if he's a great bishop. He is not constitutionally well suited to fight a culture war in opposition, at least in opposition to a pope like Francis. If Dolan excommunicated Cuomo, I am sure the Vaticans and the Jesuits around Pope Francis would make all sorts of hell for him at the Vatican. And that could be more disastrous to our cause than anything else. Maybe Francis is in a position where he can't do that. But I think Dolan, in the early part of Francis's pontificate, had enough shots fired across his bow so that he is worried about what opposition to the Vatican might mean politically. And I don't think he is constitutionally in a position where he wants to fight that battle. I think a lot of younger priests are. I think in the future there'll be a lot of younger priests who will want to fight that battle. For me, that day can't come fast enough. But right now, I'm just focused on my own generation, and I think my generation and my generation, the millennials, and their parents, the boomers, who are the people who I have a little bit more influence over, who I think need to kind of get over their own hangups a lot faster than they actually are. MJR Snyder says, for Canadian $10, thanks for this. Have you seen the speech by Ian Danskin, that's a weird name, aka Innuendo Studios, gave it at university? It's pretty revealing as to what he believes and just how clueless he is. You should watch it. Oh no, man. I really want to watch it now. I know that's going to be torture, and I just don't have time to watch it now. But I will, I'll take a look at the video and see if it's worth commenting on. Oftentimes, videos that I don't feel are worth it to make a response video to, aka this one, is they just get shoved off to this live stream series. But that's great to hear that. Thanks for your contribution and thanks for the suggestion too. Schneider, I think we're more or less finishing up with this live stream now. I think, I do hope to, the last live stream I had that was a conversation was with, what was his name? Ben Burgess from Zero Books. That's an interesting nut. The communist progressive hardcore is it's an interest. I think that there's a lot of people who are radicals right now, and he's they're getting to the point where they're getting to, I think it's getting to the point, this will increase in the future. The situation will get to the point where progressive ideas are obviously not working. And when that happens, expect to see a lot of radical progressives migrate to the radical right. And when that happens, we will know that we're on the cusp of something large. It hasn't happened yet. There hasn't been a large movement. But I think that we're coming to the point where it's obvious that the left is out of ideas. And what remains is to find something that can create a new coalition. Because the left is not going to take humanity into the future. It literally has nothing. But anyway, I'm going to end it here because of the fact that I've sort of run out of... I'm at a lull in the super chat. And thank you all for coming on. And thank you all for watching, I guess, for the hour and a half that we were on. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties that pertained to the first part of this stream. And I'll see you guys all on the next Dist and series, and maybe we can hash out more questions, perhaps even review that other video by Innuendo Studios. Have a wonderful rest of the week.